I am joined here by Professor Howe. He is Dean and Professor of the Graduate School of International Studies at Ewha Women's University in South Korea. He will be giving a panel presentation tomorrow on psychology and human insecurity, where he is going to talk about how people separate themselves from others in terms of nation, race, socioeconomic status, etc., and compete with each other for limited resources. And that causes a lot of insecurity and what we see today, the wars in Israel and Gaza and Ukraine, Russia. You mentioned that education is one key that can solve or fix this problem. Then the question is, though, if people are embedded within their own culture and society and have their own definitions of what peace is and what and these are the people that comprise national governments, and then national governments are the ones that create curricula and create educational policy. How can education then address this if education is not neutral?
Okay, well, first of all, certainly education is not neutral. You do have different curricula developed by national governments. I mean, in Korea, the Ministry of Education has a very tight control over what courses are allowed and what courses are not allowed. But within that, I think it's possible to construct practical workshops. As Joe Haldane mentioned at the start of this conference, IAFOR is all about bringing people together and getting rid of the demonization of the other through interaction and experience. So one of the things we can do in terms of curriculum design is work on ways to interact with the other. My program is actually one of the most international. We're 80% international students in the Graduate School of International Studies, and we go out of our way to expose them to as many different cultural influences as possible. So that's one way we can work on within the boundaries of the state apparatus. In addition, we can work on some practical workshops, things like John Burton's problem-solving workshop, where you get people representing all sides of a conflict come together and they have to explain the other person's position to their satisfaction. Now, it doesn't mean that you agree with or even empathize with, but it means that you have to be able to demonstrate you understand the other position. And I think that's a very important practical step. We can also use the Fisher School in Harvard's model of the assumption data tool, which is, first of all, we look at our assumptions about the conflict or our assumptions about the other and say, well, we're all social scientists here. Of course, our assumptions are going to be rational assumptions based on evidence. But is there any data that does not conform with our assumption? Let's look for other data that doesn't fit our preconceived understandings. So look for non-conforming data. Then we need to think about, are there alternative assumptions? Are there other explanations for the other's behavior or for the conflict that may fit the available information just as well or even better than our initial assumptions? So it's this self-questioning attitude that we need to take, this self-reflection on our own biases, and this is what can be brought out through education programs. But I agree, there is a danger that education can reinforce groupthink. And indeed, we've been talking about the role of technology in the last session. That's also a problem, that it's a double-edged sword. Yes, we have a democratization of information as a result of the communication and information technology revolution. But we have a proliferation of misinformation as well. And so things like the ethnic cleansing in Myanmar of the Rohingya was triggered by abuse of Facebook. So we've got to be very careful. Education can serve as a peace-building tool, but also as a conflict generation tool.
What is needed in order for also the future generation of teachers to be able to step into this self-questioning behavior?
Well, I think one really important model is teacher exchange as well as student exchange. The teachers need to be taken out of their comfort zones and placed in other scenarios, in other operating environments. I've been discussing this with the East-West Center. They're exploring new ways in which they can conduct research and collaboration. And we came up with the idea that what we need to do is take people from different countries and put them into a third country to conduct this mutually beneficial understanding development.
So there are certain crises that affect humans and nations globally in the same way. For example, climate change and food crisis, it's not a context-specific crisis. So the self is increasingly identifying itself with the other, would you say?
Yes and no. First of all, yes, of course, we're all situated in the global biosphere. So there's no escaping the consequences of the Anthropocene, the human impact on the environment, and we're all, as human beings, impacted by the environment, both operating environment and natural environment. But also I think we've experienced a great deal of pushback from the universal human rights paradigm, that the idea of universality, even if there's universality of threat or universality of understanding of human rights, we have different interpretations of the implications of these rights. So instead, what I like to look at is an overlapping consensus from different epistemological traditions, different geographic, different religious, different cultural traditions, on universal human wrongs, if you like, things that affect us all negatively and we can agree are bad. Now, of course, we have the responsibility to protect, which covers the four generally universally recognized crimes of genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity. I think we could also add to that slavery, cannibalism probably these days. You know, there are several things that are now rejected by all societies, despite at one point often being accepted by all societies. So it's an evolutionary approach, and we understand how we're evolving by interacting with the other.
So do you see in the future like a global consciousness evolving on what is wrong in this case?
Yes, I think we're already taking steps in that direction. I'd say we already have the responsibility to protect, which has been endorsed by pretty much every country on the planet. So no one these days would say that genocide is acceptable. And that's a tremendous stride, because in the past it was considered, well, even genocide, we shouldn't interfere in other societies. But now there's a conceptualization of practices that shock the conscience of humankind. Of course, in the original UN framing it was mankind, but we're moving away from the androcentric nature of language in global governance. So in future, I think this is where we need to work. We need to uncover what are the areas of potential agreement and cooperation that we can reinforce these global obligations to the other, not just to ourselves and to our co-religious, our co-nationals, our co-ethnics, whatever it may be.
Then there's also the issue that people globally might think genocide is a problem, but then institutions don't follow up. How can we solve this?
Well, again, we have the problem that the conflict of global governance is that international organization has a dualistic nature. On the one hand, international organization as a process of global governance looks to make the sovereign interstate system function better. And the way it does that is by reinforcing state-centric rights of non-interference, political sovereignty, territorial integrity, things like that. But on the other hand, the other side of the dualistic nature of international organization and global governance is we recognize that sovereignty is not absolute, that you can't do anything you want to your citizens, that you are responsible for them, that they have rights against you rather than you having rights over them. And so we're gradually seeing a transferal of sovereignty. Now, of course, global governance follows a 2 steps forward, 1 step back. At the moment, we're probably in a 1 step back because of the contestation between the 3 great powers, US, China, Russia, but also because the foremost champion of global governance was the United States. And now the United States has abdicated that role. And so we're seeing something of a void in global governance. So that's a major challenge that we need to address. And I think it's actually an area that second-tier powers like Japan and South Korea could step up and make a difference.
Is the void something that academics could feel, and why is it important to talk about these things at an international conference?
Well, sometimes governments listen to academics, not often, but occasionally some of us get the opportunity to advise policymakers. And I think it's very important that academics tackle the big issues. 1, because they may get to advise policymakers, but 2, because, of course, we're educating the next generation of world leaders. So if we can inculcate an idea of global social responsibility in the future leaders of this world, then I think we've served a decent purpose.
Thank you very much for today.
My pleasure.